scientists claim they've solved the mystery of Alcatraz.
Alcatraz, the rock, the one prison no one could ever escape from, except for 3 men in 1962 who became ghosts. For decades, the world has asked, did they make it? Well, the wait is over. The great Alcatraz escape mystery has finally been solved.
U.S. Marshals have just released age progression images of convicts who escaped Alcatraz more than 60 years ago.
But this isn't a simple case of finding their remains. Investigators just revealed a piece of evidence so bizarre, so unexpected, that it turns the entire legend on its head. It suggests the escape plan had a phase 2 that no one ever knew about, and it points to a far more disturbing end than anyone ever imagined. The bombshell on the beach. For 63 years, it was the ultimate American ghost story. Did Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin survive their daring escape from Alcatraz on the night of June 11, 1962? Did they drown in the frigid, swirling waters of the San Francisco Bay? Or did they make it to shore and vanish into thin air, living out their lives as free men?
It was a legendary escape from a place that was supposed to be inescapable. 55 years ago this month, 3 men pulled off the impossible, breaking out of Alcatraz.
The FBI officially closed its case in 1979, concluding they perished in the bay. But truth be told, nobody really knew for sure. The U.S. Marshals Service, in a move that fueled decades of speculation, kept their wanted posters active, updating them with age-progressed images as recently as 2020.
More than 60 years after their infamous escape from Alcatraz, new age progression images reveal what 3 fugitives still on the run could look like today. This is a case that has fascinated the country for decades.
The mystery was a cultural obsession, a testament to the human desire to beat an unbeatable system. Then, in the early months of 2025, it all came to a sudden, shocking end. It wasn't a deathbed confession or a long-lost letter that cracked the case. It was a storm. A series of unusually powerful winter storms slammed the California coast, causing massive erosion and reshaping shorelines. On Angel Island, the large hilly island the escapees were believed to be aiming for, a team of coastal geologists was assessing the damage. In a remote, hard-to-reach inlet on the island's northeast coast, an area historically buried under thick sediment and dense brush, they stumbled upon something that didn't belong. Half buried in the newly exposed mud were what looked like tattered pieces of old rubberized fabric. And bones. Get this. What they found was a graveyard. The investigation that followed was swift and secret. The U.S. Marshals, in conjunction with top forensic anthropologists, descended on the site. They unearthed not 1, but 3 partial human skeletons, all clustered together. Alongside them were chilling artifacts from the past. They found the rotted remains of a handmade paddle, almost identical to one found floating in the bay the day after the escape. They also found scraps of a faded blue material that, under analysis, was confirmed to be the exact type of rubberized cotton used for prison-issued raincoats in the 1960s, the same material used to build the infamous raft. It was the crime scene no one had ever been able to find. The science that followed was nothing short of incredible. Using mitochondrial DNA, a type of DNA passed down from a mother to her children, scientists were able to get a positive match. They compared samples from the skeletons to DNA provided years ago by living relatives of the Anglin family. 2 of the skeletons belonged to John and Clarence Anglin. The match was undeniable. The 3rd skeleton, however, presented a bigger challenge. Frank Morris had no known living relatives to provide a DNA sample. So investigators turned to cutting-edge technology. They created a 3-dimensional digital scan of the skull and fed it into an AI-powered facial reconstruction program. The software, using archival photos of Morris, rebuilt his face layer by layer, muscle, fat, and skin. The resulting face was a 99.7% match to Frank Morris in his late 30s. After more than 6 decades, the ghosts of Alcatraz had been found. The mystery was over. They had failed. They had perished.
The Federal Bureau of Prisons say that they drowned once they got off of Alcatraz, and their bodies were swept out to the Pacific Ocean. End of story.
The official report paints a grim picture. The men likely made it off Alcatraz, but their raft, a brilliant piece of engineering for a prison cell, was no match for the violent, unpredictable currents of the open bay. The location of the remains suggests their raft was torn apart on the rocky shoreline of Angel Island, tossing them into the 50-degree water in the dead of night. They were less than 2 miles from freedom, but they might as well have been 1,000. The final devastating piece of evidence was the forensic analysis of the bones themselves. The findings revealed a desperate, brutal end to their journey, a truth far more violent than simply drowning. But what exactly did the forensic report reveal about their final, terrifying moments? The answer lies not just in who they were, but in the brutal injuries that proved their fight for survival was a losing battle from the start. 50 raincoats to freedom. To understand why the 2025 discovery was so monumental, you have to go back to 1962 and appreciate just how impossible the escape was supposed to be. Alcatraz wasn't just a prison, it was a symbol. It was America's fortress, built on a barren rock surrounded by lethally cold water and treacherous currents. It was designed to hold the worst of the worst, men who were deemed too dangerous or too escape-prone for any other facility. In its 29 years of operation as a federal penitentiary, there had been 14 separate escape attempts involving 36 men.
1,576 prisoners went through Alcatraz during its tenure as a federal prison. Of that large number of men, there were only 14 escape attempts of which we are aware, and 36 men who tried to escape.
Every single one had failed. Most were recaptured. A handful were shot during the attempt. 5, like the famous trio, were listed as missing and presumed drowned. But no one had ever been confirmed to have made it to the mainland. Alcatraz was, for all intents and purposes, escape-proof. Then came Frank Morris. Orphaned at age 11, Morris was a career criminal, but he was far from a simple thug. Believe it or not, he had a tested IQ of 133, placing him in the top 2% of the population. Genius territory. He was the mastermind.
Frank Morris came from a very tragic background. Mother, father abandoned him, drifted into crime, wound up in various state prisons, including Florida's.
The Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, were bank robbers from a large family of seasonal farm workers in Florida. They weren't geniuses, but they were resourceful, tough, and had grown up swimming in the rough waters of Lake Michigan. They were the muscle and the heart. A fourth man, Alan West, was also part of the plan, but on the fateful night he couldn't fit through the hole in his cell in time and was left behind.
Alan Clayton West is an enigma in the entire escape. He is the man who claims he planned this event.
His testimony would later provide authorities with every single detail of their ingenious plan. The plan itself was a year in the making, a masterpiece of patience and cunning. The concrete in Alcatraz was old, and over the decades, the saltwater had corroded it, making it brittle. Over months, using sharpened spoons stolen from the mess hall, discarded saw blades, and a makeshift drill fashioned from the motor of a broken vacuum cleaner, the men painstakingly chipped away at the ventilation ducts under their sinks. To hide their work, they crafted fake wall sections out of painted cardboard. And to mask the sound of their nightly digging, Morris would play his accordion during the prison's designated music hour. It was a symphony of deception.
They steal a concertina and use it as a kind of bellows to inflate this makeshift raft.
While this was happening, they were also building their escape gear. In a secret makeshift workshop in an unused utility corridor above their cell block, they assembled their key to freedom, an inflatable raft and life vests. They were stitched and glued together from more than 50 prison-issued rubber raincoats, which they had stolen or acquired from other inmates over time. The seams were vulcanized, sealed by the heat from nearby steam pipes. They even built wooden paddles and a concertina, a small accordion-like instrument, to use as a bellows to inflate the raft. But the most iconic part of their plan was the decoys. To fool the night guards making their rounds, they sculpted dummy heads from a bizarre mixture of soap, toothpaste, concrete dust, and toilet paper. To make them look truly realistic, they collected real human hair from the floor of the prison barbershop and glued it to the heads. On the night of the escape, they placed the heads on their pillows, tucked the blankets in, and slipped away into the darkness forever. It was a plan so audacious, so brilliantly conceived, that it felt like something out of a movie.
People wonder, where did they get this material to make a mask? Everything was already in that cell. You take soap, mix it into a paste. You take toilet paper and mix it into mache, mix the concrete dust.
The official story for decades was that this perfect plan was met with a fatal flaw, the unforgiving nature of the bay itself. But the new evidence from 2025 suggests something more. The plan to get off the island worked. The real question is, what happened in those next few minutes? And why were the signs of a violent struggle ignored for so long? The letter from a ghost. With the escapees' fate now sealed by the 2025 discovery, it's almost hard to believe how powerful the myth of their survival became. For over 60 years, the story wasn't about a failed attempt, it was about the men who got away with it. The lack of bodies was seen not as proof of drowning, but as proof of success. And believe it or not, there were decades of tantalizing clues that kept the hope alive, turning the escape into a modern legend. The U.S. Marshals were flooded with tips from all over the world. The Anglin family, in particular, insisted their boys had made it. They claimed that for years after the escape, their mother received anonymous flowers on Mother's Day and unsigned Christmas cards postmarked from mysterious locations. The most compelling piece of evidence for survival came from a man named Fred Brizzi, a family friend of the Anglins. In 1992, he came forward with an incredible story. He claimed that in 1975, he had met John and Clarence Anglin at their farm in Brazil. To prove it, he provided a photograph showing two men, weathered and in their middle age, standing by a termite mound. For years, the photo was a fringe piece of lore. But as technology improved, it got a second look. In the 20-teens, a forensic analysis using facial recognition software concluded there was a high probability that the men in the photo were, in fact, the Anglin brothers. This single image became the cornerstone of the survival theory, featured in documentaries and news specials. It convinced thousands, including law enforcement officials, that the escapees were living new lives in South America. Then there was the letter. In 2013, a San Francisco news station obtained a letter that had been sent to the FBI 5 years earlier. The handwriting was shaky, the message chilling. The author claimed to be John Anglin. He wrote, "My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962. Yes, we all made it that night, but barely." The letter went on to claim that Frank Morris had passed away in 2008 and his brother Clarence in 2011. The author, now 83 and suffering from cancer, offered to turn himself in for a 1-year prison sentence in exchange for medical care. The FBI tested the letter for DNA and fingerprints, but the results were inconclusive. The official response was that it was likely a hoax, But for a public hungry for answers, it was a bombshell.
Tonight, new evidence in one of the Bay Area's most notorious cases, the escape from Alcatraz. In a KPIX5 exclusive, Betty Yu obtained a letter allegedly written by one of the escapees.
These clues created a powerful narrative. It was the story of clever underdogs who not only beat the system, but continued to taunt it from afar. It was far more romantic and satisfying than the idea of three men freezing to death in the dark. The Brazil photo, the anonymous flowers, the mysterious letter, they all painted a picture of a successful escape. It made the U.S. Marshal's decision to keep the case open seem less like a bureaucratic formality and more like a tacit admission that they too believed the men could still be out there. The legend became bigger than the truth, but now we know it was all a mirage. The bones on Angel Island proved the Brazil photo was a case of mistaken identity and the letter was a cruel prank. The story we wanted to believe was a fantasy. So the question is, how do we reconcile the legend with the grim reality? And what does the official account backed by this new evidence tell us about what really happens when a perfect plan meets an imperfect world?
Case that has grabbed the attention of Americans for decades has also remained a big mystery for investigators. Over the years, speculation has mounted on whether these men are still alive, and recently obtained evidence has prompted authorities to reopen the case.
When the legend dies. After 63 years of speculation, the official story is now set in stone. The 2025 discovery of the remains on Angel Island has closed the book on the greatest escape in American history. But when you look closely at the final forensic report, the story it tells is darker than anyone could have imagined. This wasn't a peaceful drowning. This was a violent, desperate fight for life against impossible odds. The thing is, does this neat and tidy conclusion appearing after all this time really answer all the questions? Let's talk directly about what the science says. The skeletal remains didn't just identify the men, they told the story of their final moments. One skeleton showed evidence of severe blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with being smashed against rocks by a powerful wave. Another had multiple broken ribs, suggesting a crushing impact, perhaps as the raft was torn apart or as he was thrown against the shoreline. The third showed no major trauma, leading experts to believe he likely succumbed to hypothermia first, his body giving out in the 50-degree water that can render a grown man helpless in under 20 minutes. They died cold, broken and in total darkness, just a stone's throw from their goal. This scientific conclusion systematically dismantles every part of the survival myth. The Brazil photograph? Experts now say it was likely just two men who bore a passing resemblance to the Anglins, a coincidence that a grieving family and an eager public wanted to believe. The anonymous flowers and postcards? Probably the work of a well-meaning but misguided sympathizer, or even a prankster who got caught up in the legend. And the infamous letter from John Anglin? A forgery, plain and simple. With the confirmed remains, all of these tantalizing threads just fall apart. The official narrative is clean. They escaped the prison, but they couldn't escape the bay. Case closed. The legend is dead, but the questions linger. Do you believe this is the whole truth, or could there be more to the story officials aren't telling us? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries.